Μία ανακοίνωση είναι δυστυχώς ότι η Κάιλιν Wilson Gotti δεν μπόρεσε να έρθει, μας ειδοποίησε χθες για προσωπικούς λόγους. Ελπίζουμε την επόμενη φορά. Αλλά νομίζω ότι οι δύο μιλητές που έχουμε εδώ θα μας αποζημιώσουν γι' αυτό και θα έχουμε και λίγο περισσότερο χρόνο. Θα ακούσουμε την Galit Eilat, δεξιά, η οποία είναι research curator στο Abbemuseum και πρόεδρος του Akademie der Kunste Welt στην Κολονία, ενός νέου οργανισμού. Και επίσης θα ακούσουμε τον Jens Maier-Rothe, που είναι συνιδρυτής και διευθυντής αυτού του νέου Ινστιτούτου στο Κάιρο, που λέγεται Beirut in Cairo. Ακριβώς έτσι όπως το λέω. So, guys, we can start, no, from you, yes. Galit.
Yes. Good afternoon. It's very nice to be here, and it's very nice to be again in warm weather and in place that somehow for me make more sense than the place I'm coming from. I would like I will not focus about one project. I will focus about something that I'm dealing lately. 3 years ago, I moved to Europe, to live in Europe and to work in Europe. Before that, for 9 years, I was a director in an art center in Israel. And one of the things that I noticed when I moved to Europe, that there are certain kind of practice that I developed and certain places that I'm interested to work in. And when people ask me, okay, you are curator, so you're curator for a video, you're curator of painting, you're curator of installation, performance, and when I was a director, it was very clear, you know, I'm directing an art center, and the art center have certain kind of an agenda, socio-political agenda. Maybe later I will talk more about what was the agenda, but then I'm coming and working for the Abbemuseum or work in other places. So I'm curating off, and I said I'm curating off or curating from a conflict zone. And then I had also to articulate what is a conflict zone. What is a conflict zone for me? Beside working, and I can tell that those thoughts about like my practice came also after working in Belgrade, curating the October Salon, which is the biggest exhibition that happens every year from Tito time. So I curate the 52 October Salon. And working in Kosovo. After that, I used to work quite a lot in Israel, between Israel and Palestine. So the first question for me was, how do I articulate a conflict zone? So a conflict zone for me, it's not a war zone. And a conflict zone, it can be between the state and the subject. It can be between the subject in society. It can be between different kind of ideology, but it's not mean that conflict zone immediately directed or turned to a war. And I articulate it in this sense because people said, if we look at Israel and the neighboring countries, so Israel in conflict with Arab countries, but concerning Palestine, we are not in conflict. We occupied Palestine. There is a conflict, but it's not the two-state conflict. The situation is different. So then it's come, how can I articulate my activity? And I think it's related to, beside the construction of governing or state, it's also how people operated. Moving to Europe, and questioning what I'm doing here, if there is a conflict. No, there is no conflict. There is consensus. There is a consensus, so what I'm doing there, how I can find my way. And I think what's happening now concerning a global vision of implementing or trying to implement democracy in different places that the governing structure were different, we are not talking really about democracy. Democracy really not happened, not in Europe, not in Israel. We're talking about more or less about one system, parliamentary democracy, which is a representative of democracy. And what I find different working, for example, in Kosovo or in Serbia, that you can say that they are democratic, or in Israel, which is called as a democratic. Of course, it's impossible to have a democracy for some and not to have a democracy for others. There is no possibility that some people have a privilege, then others don't have the same privilege. In the moment that I'm using the word privilege, it means that others don't have the same rights than others. But when I'm working in Europe, one of the things that I noticed, that what I'm lacking in the work, it's the ability to think, the ability to change the system. If we look at the EU, no one of the countries under the EU can take any approach, really political approach. Most of the countries guided by laws that limit them to certain kind of work. So basically, there is not much choice. Not much choice for politicians, and also not much choice for citizens. Basically, Europe today, it's in a deadlock of rules that created Europe and can't change. And I think if we talk about the crisis, so the crisis when most of the people related to economy, I will say that the crisis, it's a bit different, because there is not a question of lack of money. It's a question of lack of way of renewing the system and rethink the system, or a possibility to maneuver to other way of thinking, and maybe to rethink about democracy as a way of governing. Very important philosopher, Yeshayahu Leibovich, he died 13 years ago. He was a religious man. He dealt with science. He was come from science philosophy. In '83, he, in one of the television program, he called to the Israeli army Judo-Nazis. It's hard to say it in Israel. It's hard to say a person in the age of close to 80, sitting in one of the Popolitica, this was the name of the show, and calling to the soldier to refuse to go to the army. I'm talking about '83. I'm not talking about 2000. I'm not talking about 2010. I'm talking about a long time ago. And one of the issues that he was focusing in all his life, it's about, also as a religious man, it's how we can think the system. And one of his methods was that any system of governing, it's in conflict with the subject. So it's not, you don't need to be a nihilist and to not obey all the rules. Basically, a society, we need some rules to obey to let the society work. But to question every time the ruling system that given to us. More and more we can see, and I'm sure also here and other places, citizens or inhabitants of a city become the customer of the city. Services that should be given to the people now sell to the people, and you need to pay for them. So basically you need to buy the services that as citizens your government promised to you. How it's related to art. In general, I don't think that art or artists are not human beings, and it's not one part of the system that provide in one hand, if we are sitting in this hall of an art fair. So it's produce certain kind of economy. For me, like, maybe it's the less interesting side of art, But on the other hand, the question, how art and in what way we can work, especially about the question how the individual, how the subject can analyze and offer something which is different. And the method that developed not only by me, but also with the Art-Athina and other artists, is to try and to think about what will be a political imagination, what we can bring back to politics, since we are part of the political structure. And the political structure is the people, the people, and not the government. How we can take the responsibility to our life and not to give the responsibility for others. It's, I can give the example in Israel, but I think it's repeating everywhere. So the government, we as an Israeli, we don't occupy the Palestinian. It's the government doing it. It's the army doing it. It's the army of whom? It's the government of whom? And I think we can, this is one example which is very clear and extreme maybe, but also one of the things that we can see that Europe for many years in stagnation, it's with the sentence, it will never happen again. It will never happen again. The Second World War will never happen again. And this never happen again put kind of, cast a layer of many discussions. So no one really, in the everyday life, think about the European soldiers that are going to fight outside of Europe. I think in the US, there are much more discussion about, yes, we are in a war. It's not a war in our soil, but it's a conflict that we are producing in other places. This is completely lack of discussion to see really the reality, because there is certain kind of rules that came after the Second World War that still follow the general society and politics in Europe. Maybe now I will say a few words about what you see. It's different images from different projects. One of the projects, it's Liminal Spaces, that group of artists, Palestinian, Israeli internationals, and scholars, urbanists, architects went to a journey for 3 years, visiting places, writing, producing work. But at the same time, working and learning from a group of activists that working in one specific village that's called Bil'in. Bil'in is quite interesting case. Bil'in, it's on the Green Line, which means it's the line that was drawn on the map in '67, and the field or the agriculture work happening in one side inside the Green Line, and the village is on the other side. So people couldn't go and work in the village. And which around them there are settlers that can come overnight and build a house, and Israel is still operating according to the Ottoman law. In the Ottoman law, if one asks how come that Istanbul growing overnight and changing, one of the Ottoman law, if you build a house with a roof, you can't demolish it. Of course, it's not working per se like this, but this is one of the reasons that settlers can build a house. So what those people from the Palestinian village did, beside other activities, they built a house overnight exactly on the Green Line. And then it was for the court, that the court supposed to be free from political decision to decide if this house will be demolished because the house next to it of the settlers was not demolished. They win the case. The house stayed, and also they were able to open the fence that was blocking them from going to the fields. So by not obeying, by using the same strategy of the state strategy, adopting it and turn it to turn it back to the law, and the law, in this sense, they check the law of citizens one against the other. Yeah, so the images are from different projects, but I think this project is, for me, one of the most successful projects. And of course, art, in this case, helped a lot. In many of the projects that we did that we were not allowed to do, like as an Israeli, I'm not allowed to be in the Palestinian territories. Since it was an art project, there are sometimes other rules that you can use, and here come the art. Other rules that art is attractive, art is beautiful, it's not always understood. So this helps us to gain and to do different kind of things that we couldn't do under the umbrella of an art institute. If it's to provide permits to Palestinians to enter to Israel, if it's to work with the Foreign Office, and later on, I don't know if I have here like a newspaper, a very good colleague of mine left, and the Israeli airport known as quite a nasty, they have quite nasty security procedure. And he said that he was not in the territory even if he was allowed. And they find in his pocket the receipt from Ramallah. And then they find out that they read his computer, that he was there. So around 40 people, internationals, got number 6 in the security, which is mean like a trait, like a terrorist enter. And the Foreign Office freeze his relation with the center that I was director for 1 year, because we used them to let people to enter without this process, but we couldn't do it when they left. So there is a way that art can intervene. And I think this is one, wow, sorry. This is one way how I think, and this is not, I think, without forgetting the quality of art. I think if art, it's not quality and not promoted, you can't gain this political power and to try to find ways how not to obey or how to turn the system for you.
Great.
Okay, I did my 15 minutes.
Yes, great. Thank you.
My talk is titled "The Institutions Don't Cry," and as usual, the title comes first. In my case, also the subject headers of emails usually come first. So now there's a problem or a challenge, how to compress this into 15 minutes in a somehow for you, hopefully decompressing way. And I thought it would be perhaps best to give you a little detour around Beirut, which is the name of the art institution that I'm co-directing since October. We just opened in October last year. This detour will be about what Beirut is, what it wants to be, what it does or not, and why. And I hope this will also give you insight into the present situation of art in Egypt a little bit. And please tell me if I'm going to read most of my talk, and then please tell me if I'm reading too fast or maybe too slow, who knows. Yeah, maybe the first image. They're not so exciting, these images, actually, but they're very meaningful. This is Beirut, and Beirut is many things. And that made total sense to me, given the context. Beirut was founded in a year and 2 weeks ago, actually, exactly from now. This context being Cairo and its present landscape of art and institutions, we should underscore the need for this multiplicity. This is Beirut, and Beirut must be many things. Beirut is an institution in its pilot phase. It already runs program seasons, but its first fully fledged season as a series is yet to air. We are still testing the ground and the surroundings, locally as much as in a wider sense, while considering institution building as a curatorial act. Practically speaking, Beirut is an emerging art initiative and exhibition space located in a neighborhood of Aguza in Cairo. It currently occupies a 3-story 1940s-built villa surrounded by a garden and large trees, with exhibition spaces and a library on the ground floor, 4 studio and office spaces upstairs, and a canopied rooftop terrace, all run by a team of 3 full-time curators and a young aspiring one. In the global sense, Beirut exists in a realm of contemporary practices bound by a language and a set of presumptions that are rarely challenged or put to question. We inhabit a place in a world where it is difficult to keep imagination alive, and I think we would agree on that, to insist on a place for lateral thinking and resistance to homologation and dominant narratives. Beirut is the manifestation of a set of ideas grounded in the belief that change first needs to be imagined in order to be achieved. In that vein, we think outside existing protocols that define the institution of art and try to acknowledge the politics of art as a space of work. Specific to our mission is reimagining and relearning how to build an able institution in an unstable context where vagueness prevails as a conditioning element of the current political situation and its future, which is unclear at the moment. At a pivotal moment of change informed by the rethinking, reform, and radical overturning of political institutions in the region, the resonance of art as a locus of thought, symbolic action, and imagination towards change increases, while the sheer absence of state support and cuts in public and private funding threatens its sustenance. Artworks, however, can be a syncretic result of the spirit of their time. They bear witness of the contemporary condition, stimulate unconventional thinking towards the present, and can represent a side of encounter and exchange. Needless to say that the political situation in Egypt creates instability for programming, and it hinders longevity and forethought. Within this context, Beirut wishes to remain sensitive and responsive to our social surroundings and work within it through allowing room for ad hoc programming in a seasonal makeup. To give you maybe a little bit of a larger context, what it means to produce artworks, commission artworks in Egypt and the wider region. In Egypt, as in most of the Arab world, probably excluding the Arab Emirates, emerging art institutions rely on self-organization, grassroots knowledge, and individual or collective initiatives. The absence of larger state or private institutions, such as museums and other organizations, lends a shared reality of challenges facing artistic production. The presence and development of artworks is often reduced to event-based formats, like in the case of biennials, festivals, etc., and it is not integrated within the objectives of existing organizations. While the infrastructures for producing and exhibiting are improving very slowly only, more emphasis is placed on the exchange and circulation of individual artists abroad within this event-based framework. So, increasingly, this creates a disparity between where artists grow and are based and where their work is commissioned, produced, and presented. The commissioning bodies lie within the rising new art market centers, which obviously is outside of our local context. And as a result, more and more the work of artists from countries like Egypt, Lebanon, and Palestine are circulating internationally without showing in the region or cities themselves, like Cairo, Alexandria, Beirut, or Ramallah. The production abilities and know-hows are rarely developed locally, thereby forcing artists to bring forward ambitious projects abroad, where such support can be provided. Which is why Beirut wants to be an active partner in radically rethinking the future of art institutions in structure and sustainability with an interest in South-South model exchange. We are developing means of encouraging co-production of programming so that it can be shared across institutions. The premise of curated seasons around interrelated questions, works, and programs contributes to the development of curatorial methodologies which hopefully supplements the lack of art institutional infrastructure in the short and long term. The mission of building an art institution as a curatorial act allows us to laterally develop means of restoring the centrality of art and the role of artists in or within the rethinking how the art institution comes into formation, legally, financially, and its administrative design. Now it would be time for the next picture, which some of you might know. So all these aspects and desires find their way into our work and into our program simultaneously, hopefully. What an institution is or can be in this place and this time, how sustainable it can or should be while staying flexible and context responsive is what we currently ask ourselves. In a much needed self-reflexive gesture during the current season number 3. I think it's okay. It's not. So season 3, which is our current program, to make it very hard to not get the gist, we titled it quite bluntly, What is an Institution? This season investigates some of the key questions and conditions under which art institutions have evolved through a series of workshops, lectures, commissioned artworks, texts, and exhibitions. It looks into the contingent conditions that define the practice of contemporary art institutions, their shifting role, function, and points of discursive and linguistic emphasis, their varied historical references, where they are received, who their publics are, what informs the names, their means of organization, planning, structure, sustenance, development, and growth. That's a very long list, I know. Probably it will continue beyond that season. These questions are something that lie at the heart of what we do in general, and this is going to be at the core of our practice and our research, also involving other partners and artists, researchers over the course of the next 2 years. The mission of this investigation is to propose new charters for art institutions becoming and emerges at large out of Beirut's longer-term curatorial vision and institution building plan. We launched the season with a chaptered curatorial and artistic research project with invited artists, peers, and partner institutions, which at the moment involves the Kunsthalle Lissabon, Form Content in London, the Center for Contemporary Art in Derry, Londonderry in Ireland, and Art in General in New York. On the occasion of the first group meeting last month, Form Content developed an exhibition project as part of their current program, which is titled It's Moving from I to It. This program is an exploration of visual language, abstraction, disappearance, and the object. It takes shape over the course of 15 months, and it is a way to think the institution as a script or narrative in a sequence of scenes. This exhibition from Form Content, developed by Form Content in dialogue with us, which is currently displayed at our spaces, takes its title cue from Scene 2, Alas, Alas, by Chris Sharp. The story goes like this. A confused becoming subject distracts the stranger from the act of reading while looking for a book in a library. An intimidating librarian tries in vain to assist in her request, until a deluge of books chases the characters out of the library, which is also a theater. We have been working towards this season by setting up a legal entity in dialogue with the collaborative framework Golden Seneby from Sweden. Our checks are now must be signed by and for Golden and Seneby Limited Liability Company. This not only brings more problems to the table when heading to the electrician next door to buy a light bulb, which always need to bring back receipts with a VAT number on and the right company, and it's not easy to explain that this is our company and why it's not Beirut, which on the other hand is also not so easy to explain. So this does not only bring more problems to the table, it also actively pursues a very simple question that we would like to ask. Can an institution be actually an artwork? And can it meet completely different audiences on this way or on its way? People we have been excluding so far, such as funders, service workers, administrative partners, or perhaps eventually the Egyptian government, hopefully, which we haven't been excluding deliberately so far, at least not from our side. All images I'm showing here were trustfully inserted into our operations by Biobaker, which is a transdisciplinary graphic design collective founded in 2000 and based in London, towards designing an open work-in-progress identity for Beirut. Currently, our logo presents The Cure, or more precisely, a reminiscence of their album cover for Boys Don't Cry. What I believe spurred this on Biobaker's end of things was more the album's song Fire in Cairo. But it does make us think as well, again, of what an institution is, what institutions can or cannot do, and what defines their behavior. Institutional reality increases power, and by increasing institutional reality, we increase human capacity for action. In his essay, What is an Institution?, John Searle suggests that presupposing the institution of language is precisely what holds us back from being able to think ourselves beyond the current condition. If we presuppose language, we have already presupposed institutions. Boys don't cry is a simple saying. It's a rule of thumb, if you will, which presupposes a gender-specific role or behavior. If Beirut is female, is she allowed to, or is she even supposed to cry? Does she have to cry? One tear can summarize or turn around the whole plot in a movie. It can be the one gesture that leads to a happy end. Others, in other places, must cry out in an uncontrolled way, since it is the last possible realm of action. As the saying suggests, boys should not resort to this last possible realm of action or emotion. But of course, this convention or agreement that this saying suggests wants to be read in a positive and affirmative way. Yes, boys do cry too. So what about institutions? Why do they need to be hemmed in by normative conceptions of what an institution really is or has to be? Can institutions be indeterminate nowadays, or in other words, perceptively ambiguous? Our understanding of institution builds on circulating terms, cliches, traditions, and premises. Too fast, too slow? I can go on? 5, that's perfect. I need only 3, I think. Our understanding of institution builds on circulating terms, cliches, traditions, and premises, which manifest themselves often in administrative and bureaucratic form as directly applicable rules, laws, precise statutes, contracts, and so on. Altogether, they indicate on what basis we perceive, discuss, and understand institutions, and how we think them into the future. If institutions want to be relevant in the time and space they're operating in, they have to be context responsive. In a shifting time of transition, like ours, this requires institutions to stay in movement and conceive themselves as open processes. In short, if they want to manifest change, they have to change, adapt, and rearrange themselves. Within the context of the situation in Egypt and the region, this demands less of an institutional critique, but a mode of productive yet critical institution building, one that finds its relation to the notion of the political in an indirect way. This, of course, needs to be read and placed in relation to post-foundationalist thinking, which, in a brief excursion, if you allow, roots in the absence of an ultimate ground or foundation in the structuring of social and political life. Sorry. Or what Lefort calls very simply the dissolution of the markers of certainty. In that sense, post-foundational thought is a process of infinite questioning the metaphysical figures that tend to define the modalities of collective life and action through such markers of certainty, like, to give you a few examples, universality, totality, subject, gender, cultural identity, the nation state, and so on. Only under the condition of absence of such a final ground or foundation, or its debatable nature per se, plural and partial foundations are made possible. Since founding and building institutions for us is a personal gesture that is political in and of itself, we found ourselves with a truly productive and political paradox of an institution that is there but not quite. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being so precise, both of you, with time, because these are some questions around stereotypes, obedience, state, politics that, you know, it's very hard to be discussed or even introduced in 15 minutes, I think. But thank you so much. Νομίζω ότι ακούσαμε πολύ ισχυρά μηνύματα για μισή ώρα και ελπίζω ότι έχουν γεννήσει διάφορες ερωτήσεις στο κοινό που έχουμε ακόμα ένα τέταρτο να τις ρωτήσετε και ίσως να πάρετε μία απάντηση πιο στερεή σε αυτό που θέλετε να ακούσετε. Ελπίζω να είναι κάποιος. I just said that, I mean, we heard quite interesting topics, and I'm sure there are many questions around that. We have about a quarter to, and I'm sorry I'm being the bad one, but you know, we are creating a sort of a we're sort of hijacking an art fair here, and we have to be precise on time so we can still be here and speak about things that maybe are more interesting than the commerce. So if there are questions, please. Yeah.
Hello. First of all, I would like to say that I really enjoyed both presentations. They're right to the point. And I'll speak now from as the director of the Culture Observatory of the Middle East that we founded in Nicosia, Cyprus in 2005. And we'll be doing a lot of cultural mapping in both
Excuse
Beirut.
me, I cannot understand you, sir.
Closer to the mouth.
Now can you hear me better?
Yes.
It's okay?
All right.
Shall I repeat? Or? So since 2005, we've been doing cultural mapping especially in Beirut and Alexandria and Cairo. And of course, we realized that most of all the actions that took place there and all the institutions that have been born, they've been funded by Ford Foundation. So actually, you find there is always a funding. If it's not Ford Foundation, it's founded by another institution which is funded by Ford Foundation. So I'm trying to understand now what is, for example, the independence and the networking that exists between Cairo and Beirut, and what is the results so far about your existence in Cairo. We really did go beyond the curtains in both countries. We were arrested by Hezbollah on the regular stuff that happens there when you are a little bit more curious than you should. But we found out that there is an artistic action that actually it exists, but it runs on empty calories for some reason sometimes. It doesn't really make strong political statements. And now I wanted to see if this is because of the funding procedure that exists in Lebanon and Cairo, especially in Cairo, and that just if there is any relation to that.
Who do you want to respond, me or Galit or both?
First, you.
Okay.
Because I can respond.
So first of all, we don't do anything in Beirut. It's just the name of our institution. Maybe that is a confusion. And the other thing is we don't get any money from Ford Foundation so far as an institution. And the situation also has changed, by the way, with the Ford Foundation in the region. There was a certain period of time where it was very fruitful. It was almost like a... Sorry?
Now it's Anna Lind taking Anna Lind Foundation.
I don't know, actually. But, so yes, that's for starters. But I agree, I mean, there is always there's a lot of talk about independence, and in fact, everybody needs money from someone, and there's always a certain logic within the funding structure that usually tilts our eyes and minds north or west. And especially in terms of what the Townhouse Gallery of Contemporary Art, for instance, which has a very continuously running residency program, which builds up most of their also, a large part of also their curated program, has been coming with the money in the pockets of, I don't know, the Danish-Egyptian Dialogue Institute, or the Arts Council of Denmark, or a lot of like Scandinavian artists coming down there. But what I think what we want to try is, in terms of independency, is creating like affiliations between institutions, like an interdependency between institutions, which first of all makes us together a bit more or less dependent on larger funding sources and various pots of money, which often come with a certain political agenda also, which in the case of Western European governmental support comes very often with the idea of democratization processes and supporting those, which is a very, it's an odd venture in a country like Egypt right now, because you cannot just place a democracy in that state, of course. So it supposedly makes us more independent from these larger funding sources, but at the same time it makes us interdependent in between, which hopefully also guarantees influence towards each other. So people, it's not becoming such an insular or monopolized position that one institution can take up, for instance. Does that, yeah? Okay. Maybe I should say, maybe one of these things is also a program that we're starting. It's called Collaborative Commission. So we try to commission things together, also with other museums, as I said, in a South model exchange, but also with other museums in Europe who have an interest in supporting artists from Egypt and supporting the region, but don't know how exactly. And not doing this like just inviting and exhibiting, but actually create more of like a fruitful regional infrastructure that makes producing and exhibiting artwork in the region possible in a better way.
I want to comment very briefly. I think autonomy, it's not given, autonomy, it's taken. So the freedom of the institute, it depends on the activity of the institute and not of the one that's giving the money. Of course, it can create a tension between institute and the one that giving the money. If it's the state, if it's a public money, if it's a private, it's a good thing in general. It's make both sides to think and to develop. And I think it's very important. Now, one of the things that I noticed, which is, especially in Europe, it's clear that money need to be there and need to come from the welfare state, which is not in many other countries. It's not in Turkey, it's not in Egypt, it's not in Lebanon, and most of the institute finance privately, or they have another scenario that's very close to what Ford did in the past, or Annalyn today, which is hijacked even the EU support, which is a completely corruption thing. I hope you are not part of presenting one of them. But I think, and this is the system of the NGOs that paralyze, basically implementing their own employees in different kind of institute and paralyze the growth and the activity of the local people. So basically there are a few systems, but one of the things which is quite interesting is to look at the different system, to look at the different institute, how they operate, and to take what is interesting, because they're different systems and not only the European or support system that built here, not here it's not anymore, or maybe never, the welfare state, which is like, this is like the image that everybody wants to go to Europe to have the subsidy that the Dutch give to the artists or the Austrian. First, it's not exist anymore, and in the future, it will disappear completely. And it's not create a better institute or a better art. This is for sure. So.
And I'm actually happy. I mean, I'm looking forward to having a Ford grant. I wouldn't reject it.
Yeah, they're out.
Sorry?
They're out, more or less, from the region. Not so much. Not as they used to 10 years ago.
Καμία άλλη ερώτηση? Any other question before we...
The lady, I mean, here, yeah. The lady, it seems to me that you have been quite effective with your work in Israel, and where art is a kind of how to say, Gerechtigkeit. What does it mean? I don't know in English.
With the microphone close to your mouth.
I don't know in English what means Gerechtigkeit. What does it mean? Justice, yeah, it's a question, art is a question of justice, which you tried to do something in what you feel is right, and you connected the power of Palestinians and Israel, and so it seems to me it was an effective job, and now you changed to the Museum of the World, and I don't know if in this kind you are same effective, or you are kind of foreign minister of the activity you had already, or what is now your main thing, which I didn't quite get. Thanks.
Okay. My main thing, I'm doing a few things. One, I'm working as a research curator, so I'm working in a museum, which is Vanabe. It's in a very small city, post-industrial, that's called Eindhoven. And on the other hand, I'm the president of the Academie of the World. It's in English, it sounds more strange than in German, in Cologne. And I must say, we are reforming an institute, and I think your question is to the point. It's to the point in the way, since the Academy, if I can say a few words, when I say we, I and the other members, which are artists from different art fields, invited to the city to initiate an institute. But as long that I'm the president, I realize they invite us to be the symbolic stamp or the kosher stamp for the city activity. And this is for me personally, it's very interesting situation to see if we can change it. Because Cologne had a great legacy of art fairs, first art fair, and I think the biggest, as they see it, the crisis there, that most of the artists and intellectuals moved to Berlin, and they still want to be on the horse or part of the field. So they brought amazing people from all around the world, from different disciplines, not just visual art, but basically what they gave us, it's to say yes to what they want to do. And this is now, when I'm coming back, I'm going to Cologne to meet the mayor and others to see how we can shift it to the other direction. Basically, if they offer us to come to advise, so they need to listen. So if you ask, this is my little conflict now. Sorry?
You are fighting again in the same manner as you started in Israel, I think, and this is now, that's what I wanted to know, that you didn't take a job in Europe to do other things, but it's a fight you were continuing, in a way.
Maybe it's personality. Maybe I'm looking for a conflict or try to make my life more interesting. Maybe it's a psychological defect or something. But I think it's quite interesting. I think it's quite interesting when you talk about institute and you do something, you have different way how to gain what you want. And one of the question that I'm dealing with, one of them, it's not the conflict per se, because one will say you are pushing a conflict. No, it's what it's create, and sometimes it's create it's not fast thinking, but different way how to solve situation because it's urgent. And the other thing is how we, in what we do, can influence political imagination in general, and how we can talk about things which are not exist. Here I gave you the, the tree.
No, I say another sense. I had a friend and he was from Skopje, and he wrote a book about Skopje and he called it Skopje, the city bastard, because of living all different groups of different religions and everything. And then he said a sentence which I like, it's called, the conflict is the city planner. And in this way, I feel it's going on. Okay, thank you.
Sorry? City planner. I think he meant something.
Any more questions? I guess not. Well, thank you very much. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ που ήσασταν εδώ. Thank you very much. Thank you.